I am 99 years old, and I need to tell you something that I have been sitting with for a long time. Not because it is easy to say, but because somebody should have said it to me 70 years ago, and nobody did. I did not lose my life in some dramatic moment. There was no accident, no single bad decision, no day I can circle on a calendar and say that is where everything fell apart. What happened to me was quieter than that. 3 habits, 3 things that looked completely normal, things my neighbors did, things the man at my church did, things that would have made any man in my town nod and say, yes, that is how you do it. And those 3 things took everything from me, so slowly I did not even notice until most of it was already gone. Things the man at my church did, things that would have made any man in my town nod and say, yes, that is how you do it. And those 3 things took everything from me, so slowly I did not even notice until most of it was already gone. My name is Harold Bennett. I was born in 1925 outside of Macon, Georgia. My father worked at a textile mill 6 days a week. My mother stretched every dollar so far it was practically transparent. We did not have much, but we had each other, and we had the understanding that you worked hard, you kept your head down, and you did not complain. That was the Bennett family code. That was the only code I ever knew. I carried it with me when I got drafted in 1944. I carried it home when the war ended. I carried it into my marriage, into my job at the hardware store on Jefferson Avenue, into the house I bought in 1952 for $11,000 with a 30-year mortgage that felt like a life sentence. I carried it through raising 3 children, through burying a wife, through watching the world change around me in ways that still make my head spin. And I never once stopped to ask whether that code was actually serving me, whether following it so faithfully was the same as living well. It was not, and I'm going to tell you exactly why. The first habit that destroyed my life was something I was genuinely proud of for 60 years. I never let anyone see me struggle. Now, before you decide that sounds like wisdom, let me tell you what it actually looked like from the inside. It was 1962. I was 37 years old. We had 3 kids under 10. Dorothy was working part-time at the elementary school on Peach Street, and I had just found out that the hardware store where I had worked for 11 years was closing. The owner, Mr. Garfield, a good man, called me into his office on a Tuesday morning and told me he could not keep the doors open anymore. He shook my hand and said, "Harold, you are the best man I ever employed." And I walked out of that building onto Jefferson Avenue in the middle of a Wednesday morning with nowhere to be and no idea what I was going to do next. I drove home, sat in the driveway of our house on Sycamore Lane for 45 minutes. Then I walked inside, and when Dorothy asked me why I was home early, I told her Mr. Garfield had given everyone the afternoon off. I did not tell her the truth for 3 weeks. 3 weeks I woke up every morning, put on my work clothes, drove to the library on Central Avenue, spent the day reading the classifieds and filling out applications, and came home at 5:30 like nothing had changed. I did not want her to worry. I did not want the kids to feel scared. I told myself I was protecting them. What I was actually doing was carrying something alone that I did not have to carry alone. And the weight of that secret, the weight of pretending, the weight of performing calm when I was terrified inside, that took something out of me that I never fully got back. I finally told Dorothy on a Sunday evening after church. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, and she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Harold, why didn't you tell me?" Not angry, just genuinely confused. Why didn't you tell me? And I did not have a good answer. Because I thought I was supposed to handle it? Because I thought a man who could not handle his own problems was not much of a man? Because somewhere between Georgia and adulthood, I had learned that struggle was something you hid. Dorothy went back to work full-time the following Monday. We were fine. We were always going to be fine. but I had spent 3 weeks alone in a fear I did not have to be alone in. And that was just one time. That was just one example of a pattern that ran through my entire life like a crack in a foundation. I did not tell Dorothy when I was scared. I did not tell her when I was grieving. When my father passed in 1971, I stood at the graveside in Macon, and I did not cry once. Not because I was not heartbroken, but because men in my family did not do that in public. I drove home from the funeral, went straight to the garage, and sat in the dark for 2 hours by myself. Dorothy knocked on the door and asked if I was okay. I said yes. I was not okay, but I said yes. 54 years of marriage, 54 years of a woman who would have carried anything with me if I had just let her. And I spent most of those years convinced that protecting her from my darkness was the same as loving her well. It was not. It was just lonely for both of us. Here is what I want you to hear. The men in your life who look the most unshakable are very often the loneliest. Not because nobody loves them, but because they have spent so long performing strength that they no longer know how to ask what they actually need. And that performance costs you. It costs you real closeness. It costs you real partnership. It costs you the relief of being known by someone who loves you anyway. Do not perform. Be real. The people in your life can handle the real version of you far better than you think, and you deserve to find that out while you still have time. The second habit that destroyed my life was one I never would have called a habit at all. I would have called it moving on. I would have called it being the bigger man. I would have called it not dwelling. But what it actually was is the thing that poisoned more years of my life than anything else. I let resentment take up permanent residence inside me, and I pretended it was not there. In 1968, my brother Raymond and I had a falling out over money. We had gone in together on a piece of land outside of Atlanta that we thought we could develop and sell. It was Raymond's idea. I put in everything I had saved over 10 years, and Raymond made a decision without telling me that cost us the entire investment, everything, gone. He had his reasons. I'm sure in his mind they were good reasons, but he did not consult me. He did not warn me. He just made the call and then called me to tell me what he had done after it was already done. I remember standing in my kitchen on Sycamore Lane, holding the telephone receiver so tightly my knuckles went white. Dorothy was in the next room. The kids were watching television, and I felt something shift inside me like a door closing, not slamming, just quietly swinging shut and latching. I told Raymond I understood that these things happen, that we would figure it out, and then I hung up the phone and I never talked about it again. Not to Raymond, not to Dorothy, not to anyone. I showed up at Thanksgiving that year and every year after. I sat across the table from my brother, I passed the sweet potatoes, I laughed when something was funny, and I carried that closed door inside me every single day for the next 30 years. People around me would have said Harold and Raymond are close. We looked close, but something real between us had died in 1968, and neither of us ever did the work to bring it back. I told myself I had forgiven him, but forgiveness that you declare without doing the actual internal work of releasing something is not forgiveness, it is just storage. And I stored that hurt for 30 years, while it quietly changed the way I moved through the world. It made me slower to trust people at work. It made me quicker to expect disappointment from the people I loved. It put a layer of glass between me and everyone around me that I could see through but could not quite reach through. And I never connected it to Raymond because I had told myself that chapter was closed. It was not closed, it was just unread. Raymond passed in 2001, heart attack. He was 73 years old. I flew to Atlanta for the funeral, and I sat in that church on Peachtree Road, and I realized with a clarity that was almost physical that I had wasted 30 years of a brother, not because of what he did in 1968, because of what I did with it afterward, because I chose storage over healing, because I confused silence with resolution, because I waited for an apology that never came, instead of deciding that my own peace was worth more than being right. Whatever you are holding right now, whatever happened to you, whatever someone did that you cannot seem to get past, I am not telling you it did not matter. I am not telling you to pretend. I am telling you that the weight of it is yours to carry as long as you choose to carry it. And carrying it will not change what happened. It will not make them pay. It will only make your back hurt. Set it down, not for them, for the 30 years you still have left.
The third habit that destroyed my life is the one that I think about sitting on my porch in the evenings, because it was the most invisible, the most socially acceptable, the most completely approved of by everyone who knew me. I kept waiting for my real life to start. Dorothy wanted to see the Pacific Ocean. She had never been west of the Mississippi. She grew up in rural Georgia, just like me, and the Pacific Ocean was this enormous dream she carried around like something fragile. She talked about it the way some people talk about heaven, like it was real but far, like it was coming eventually if you were patient enough. We were going to go when the kids were older. Then we were going to go when the mortgage was paid off. Then we were going to go when I retired. I retired in 1987. We were going to go that fall, but her mother got sick and we stayed. The following year, I had a procedure on my knee and we stayed. The year after that, Dorothy was tired more than usual and we thought maybe we would wait until she was feeling stronger. Dorothy passed in 1993. She never saw the Pacific Ocean. I drove out there alone in 1995, 2 years after her funeral. It took me 4 days from Georgia because I stopped along the way. I stood on a beach outside of San Diego on a Tuesday afternoon in October, and I watched the water, and I cried in a way I had not cried since I was a boy. Not just for Dorothy, for all of it. For every year I had said later, for every plan I had postponed, for every evening on our porch on Sycamore Lane when I could have said, Dorothy, let us go, let us just go. And I did not, because there was always a reason to wait. Because waiting felt responsible, because patience felt like virtue. It is not virtue. It is just postponement dressed up in a respectable coat. My grandson, Tyler, is 38 years old, lives up in Nashville. Good young man, works hard, coaches his son's Little League team on Saturday mornings. Last Christmas, he told me he and his wife had been talking about taking the family to see the Grand Canyon. They had been talking about it for 4 years, always something, always next year. I looked at him across the Christmas table and I said, Tyler, go in the spring. Do not wait for a better time. There is no better time. There is only time, and you do not know how much of it you have. He looked at me like I had said something strange. Then he nodded slowly, like something had landed. They are going in April. I wish someone had said that to me in 1975. I wish someone had sat across from me and said, Harold, the life you are waiting for is not coming. The life you have is the one you are living right now, today, this Tuesday, this ordinary evening. This is it. And if you keep waiting for conditions to be perfect, you will reach the end of it with a list of things you meant to do and a Pacific Ocean you never saw together. Stop waiting. Whatever it is, the trip, the conversation, the thing you keep meaning to start, the relationship you keep meaning to repair, do it now, imperfectly, without the right conditions, without everything lined up the way you imagined. Just do it now, while now is still available to you. 3 habits, 3 completely ordinary things. I hid my struggle from the people who loved me and called it strength. I stored my resentment and called it moving on. I postponed my life and called it being patient. None of them were what I thought they were. They were just fear. Fear of being vulnerable, fear of confrontation, fear of imperfection, fear dressed up in language that sounded respectable. I am 99 years old. I live in the same house on Sycamore Lane that I bought in 1952. The kids are grown and scattered. Dorothy has been gone for 30 years. Raymond has been gone for over 20. Most of the people who knew the younger version of me are already on the other side. But you are still here, and you are still in the middle of your story. And I am telling you from the far end of a long life that the habits that will cost you the most are not the obvious ones. They are the quiet ones, the respectable ones, the ones that look like strength and patience and responsibility while they slowly empty you from the inside. Let people in. Let go of what is poisoning you, and stop waiting for a life that is already happening right now, whether you are present for it or not. Now, if you will excuse me, there's a porch on Sycamore Lane and an evening sky that Dorothy always said was the best thing about Georgia. And tonight, I am not going to wait to go sit in it.